Welcome to Inside Sim Racing. I'm Sean Cole with my good buddy
Darren Ganji.
And we are here today to finally get to our review of the Clubsport base and the two different wheel options that are currently available for it. And this is a very long overdue review, but we have been shaking this stuff down for quite a while.
Yes, as a matter of fact, this thing has been set up, well, you don't see the actual base because it's still hooked up to my rig. But I've had the thing set up on my rig personally for about a month. You had yours for about a month before that.
And we both run some very long races each on these wheels, not just a normal shakedown. I mean, this might be the most thorough ever.
And before you start typing in the comments here on YouTube, why is it taking so long? Just don't even bother asking. We've got one, we're reviewing it, we're gonna tell you what we think. So, let's get started, shall we?
Yes, absolutely.
So, we have, first of all, the two rims that the Clubsport wheel comes with. You have two different options. The BMW M3 GT2, which is pretty much an exact replica of the real deal. And
we've got the Formula style rim, which is 260 millimeters wide.
Oh, by the way, this is 320 millimeters wide, or about 13 inches, I think.
Which is gigantic.
It is, it's big.
And each version does come with its own quick release, so they're interchangeable. If you didn't know that, they both can switch back and forth, and you basically can purchase this with either or both.
Well, you start with the base.
Right.
And then you have to buy one of the other rims.
Right.
And we'll get to all that and the prices here in a moment.
So you already mentioned the base, so let's start with the Clubsport wheelbase, and it goes for $449 plus shipping. It's made of CNC aluminum. I mean, this is a completely metal-bodied wheel.
Yep.
The wheel is run by dual force feedback motors on a belt drive system that offers a very smooth and silent operation. It also has a large silent fan that handles the cooling of the internal parts.
The wheel's input is measured through an optical sensor that is directly mounted to the wheel shaft. This offers minimal dead zone or input lag. And if you're wondering, this is the box cover stuff, so this isn't stuff that we pulled out of a hat. It also has a newly designed belt drive mechanism that is made completely of metal and uses high quality ball bearings and European belts to deliver the smoothest, most precise force feedback possible.
The wheel has 900 degrees of rotation, and through its software can be tuned down to 90 degrees. Other tunable options are force feedback, sensitivity, vibration, ABS, linearity, dead zone, and drift mode. You can also pre-program up to 5 different configurations, and you can just switch between them.
Yep. So the wheel being made mostly of metal, it's pretty hefty, coming in at about 15 pounds. And it has the same mounting points as the standard Fanatec stuff. So the old 911s, the CSR. So you could mount it with that, with the bracket, or take the bracket off, and it's got a triangular mount.
3-bolt pattern.
3-bolt pattern, exactly. So actually 2 different ways to mount it, so plenty of different mounting options. The wheelbase does not come with either of these. So again, for that $450 that Sean mentioned, that's just for the base. So you have to then buy one of these 2 wheels to go with it.
Right. So.
And again, it's a quick release.
Exactly.
So comes in and off. Now, we'll talk about this a little later too. I don't know how quick it is because they give you this, it's called a travel pin, and we're gonna get to pros and cons, and there's not really much documentation that comes with it, but I tend to put the pin in while I was racing. Did you have it in?
I ran it without. I think that over a long term, that's gonna let things stay a little more secure. So if you weren't changing rims, I would put that pin in. If you're changing all the time, I don't know. It kind of defeats the point of a quick release though.
It does, and there's even a mount point here for it too, where it goes right there, and we'll show you some footage of how it screws in. So anyway, we're getting off subject here. So it's got this quick release mechanism on both rims, and again, those are sold separately.
Absolutely, and so why don't we move to the rims? And I've got the Formula rim here. It's $179.95, and I'm not gonna call it the first option, but it's one of the options for the base. As I mentioned earlier, it's 260 millimeters across. It has Alcantara grips. It is made of aluminum as well, and it's black anodized. Really nice finish. Little plastic on the back. The face is made of the aluminum, and as we mentioned,
mostly made of metal.
As we mentioned, as the very heavy-duty aluminum quick-release mechanism as well.
It also has aluminum paddle shifters that are adjustable and removable, 11 different buttons, a mini analog joystick, and a 7-way encoder. It also has a large 3-digit display here, which the other Fanatec wheels had too, but this one also has it. And then it also has LED or rev lights that are included or built in. This can also show in-game stuff. So like iRacing is now compatible. It'll show the gear and the rev lights. But then EK Sim software, you can also like fully adjust it in the encoder here.
Right.
And like changes your position and oil temp and a bunch of different things. So this thing's fully configurable.
And the other thing we had mentioned, the tuning menu, that's all done through this as well.
Yep.
The wheel also features the ABS vibration motors. So they're built-in motors that'll actually, with certain games, they'll fire. So when you get the ABS signal, you'll get a little vibration in the wheel that'll warn you of it.
Yep. So that takes us to the next option, and that's the BMW M3 GT2 official, licensed, and replica pretty much. I mean, you couldn't plug this in to a car, but it feels like you
Well, there's
could.
that one video where they did act like it was plugged in, and you could see
I'm familiar with that video.
You could see how close it was to the real deal, though.
Yeah, very close. And this one goes for $249.95, and again, it's an exact replica. It's also wrapped in full Alcantara and is constructed mostly of metal.
Mostly.
Also like the F1. Yeah, just got a little bit of plastic in the back here, but I mean, the main construction is metal.
And like the Formula wheel, I mean, you're talking the display, the 11 buttons, the encoders, all of that good stuff, just in a different layout, different colors, but essentially all the same features. And then this one also has adjustable paddles that are removable as well.
Yeah, and bigger paddles that
Yeah.
fits the GT2 rim a little bit better.
Absolutely.
So now this wheel alone weighs about 8 pounds. So I gotta say, I got a feeling this quick release is definitely a heavy piece.
Yeah, well, look at how bulky it is. I mean, this is like I don't know if it's the same, but it looks like a real car quick release. I mean, it's that beefy. So this entire kit, as tested, both wheels and the base, we're looking at $879.85 for the whole trio.
And that does not include pedals. So if you're just starting out from scratch, you're gonna need to buy a set of pedals. And if you're buying this rim, I mean, you might as well buy the Clubsport pedals that go with it. And that's $250. So out the door, you're looking at over $1,000 shipped to your door with a decent, I mean, you could drop down to the Elite pedals. I really wouldn't recommend going anything lower than that in the Fanatec line. But you could also use G25 or G27 pedals. So if you're upgrading from that wheel, you can get an adapter and use your existing pedals.
Sure,
So,
but like you said, if you're spending that kind of money, why would you not get the Clubsport pedals, to be honest with you? I mean, for me personally, I mean, maybe I'd skip one of the wheels for now, get the pedals, get the wheel later. Anyway, that's up to you out there.
You know, another thing I want to say real quick, if you're buying this, I hope you have a rig to attach it to. Because this is not meant to be attached to a desk. Yes, it can be attached to a desk, but man, if you're gonna spend $1,000 on a set of wheel and pedals, get a rig.
Yeah.
Now, like Human Racing we have back here, something substantial that this is gonna attach to.
Or elegant enough. I mean, obviously at $1,000, you've stepped up to a certain level of sim racer.
You know something we didn't mention about this, and we've been using this phrase for a lot of really cool stuff that we get? Sim racing art.
Yeah.
And the base, we don't have it sitting here. We got a picture of it, but we'll show you lots of footage of it. But man, this base and the window to see down into the mechanism, man, that is sim racing art. And this is a very nicely put together package.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I would actually say this is the nicest looking wheel on the market. I mean, when you take the whole thing.
Even compared it to an ECCI or a Frex, which is the next step up as far as price point goes.
Yeah.
Clubsport looks better.
Much more elegant. Like
and as much as we love our T500, Clubsport's got it beat as far as looks.
Oh, absolutely.
Mechanism.
Absolutely.
So that's going to wrap up the first half of the show. This is going to be a little bit of a long one because this is a pretty special review here. When we come back, we're going to go over some categories like we have in the past, talk about force feedback, paddles, button placement, that kind of stuff, pros and cons, and we're going to even score it. So stay tuned. We'll have all that when we come back.
Sound crashes over me. The crews, engines, crowd. The air is electric. Every rider burning to win. And each one pushing to the limit. But when I find that edge, when they all fall away, the silence is deafening. And I know at that moment that I am the one. MotoGP 13 out in June.
Welcome back to our review of the Fanatec Clubsport Wheelbase and BMW GT2 rim and Formula rim. I'm Darren Ganji here with my good buddy Sean Cole. And so we told you all about this thing in the first half of the show. Now it's time to tell you what it was like after we bolted this thing to our rig and took it through its paces.
Got down to driving. And first thing you mentioned earlier, the different mounts. So it does mount with the regular Fanatec mounts, or you go with that 3-bolt pattern. It's very straightforward though. I mean, an old mount just went right in, or drill new 3 holes. Very straightforward. I went without the mount, so it kept it a little bit lower and flatter. That mount put a little bit of angle on it as well.
And then for me, I used the player frame set that we just set up with my scat seat, and I used the angle mount, and then Sean had his just directly to the base. So the Human Racing is drilled to do it either way.
Yeah.
With the angle mount or directly flat to the base.
Yeah.
And also I just ran almost 500 miles this last weekend with that particular setup, with that rim, Clubsport wheel on that player frame set. So.
Well, and that's after doing a month's worth of driving. That was sort of your final test.
It was.
And then onto the software side of the install, you know, it came with no software. So the first thing you have to do is go run to their website, download some drivers. Came with an instruction manual that was not adequate.
I wouldn't even call it an instruction manual. It's a piece of paper called the quick guide.
Yeah, a fancy printed piece of paper that does very little for you in terms of helping you get set up. But it was pretty straightforward once we obtained the software that we needed.
The price of admission for this wheel and pedals, or wheel set, there's no pedals included, is pretty expensive. So this isn't something that, if you don't have a rig already, or some kind of, like a Human Racing chassis or something that you're going to attach it to, this is not really set up for, I mean, you can do it. You can attach it to a desk or whatever you want, but this thing is really made for semi-professional setup.
Something elegant. Don't put it on a piece of junk. I mean, like, I loved my Deathmobile, but if I were going to put this on a rig I built, I'd want to take a little more time than my Deathmobile even. All
right, so let's get into the performance of this rim, starting with the force feedback. And let's go with you first, Sean.
Okay. Force feedback is great force feedback. I did have a small problem. I know the force feedback on the low end seems a little light, so I kept cranking it up, but then you get really close to the point where it becomes too much force feedback. So I found a little tough to get it just right, but it's got great force feedback. You feel it through the wheel being so smooth, you do get good force feedback.
Yep, and we did the majority, or on the PC, all of our testing on iRacing, and it takes some dialing in. It takes some trial and error. The Fanatec wheel requires a lot more force feedback gain in game compared to like the Thrustmaster where you're down below 10. This I'm above 10, it seems, across the board, and it seems every car and track you can be with the same car and change tracks, and you need a different setting, and that's like that with every wheel. But like Sean said, it needed more force feedback. Now, did it not have enough force feedback? It's got plenty.
Oh yeah.
I ran 500 miles with that thing 2 days ago, and it beat me up.
Right.
I probably had it a little too high, so it's strong. Now it can get to the point where it's so strong you could probably hurt yourself.
Yeah, so when you crash, what are you gonna do?
You pull your hands off the wheel. I'm doing just like the IndyCar guys, and I'm taking my hands off that wheel because I don't want to hurt, I don't want to sprain or break. And I'll tell you what, if you weren't paying attention and you hit a wall hard enough, and you had the force feedback totally cranked up, you could probably break a finger.
Oh, I'm sure.
So very solid force feedback. Next, let's get to the buttons.
Okay.
Starting with your rim.
My rim,
rim, I should say.
The buttons are extremely high quality buttons, and they have really good feedback. So it's not just the quality, it's the feeling. I mean, they got good spring, they have a good positive click, but they're not too much either.
Probably the best buttons that I've seen on a wheel.
I agree with you.
Right in the middle as far as not too hard to push and very high quality.
Yeah, and the same thing goes for the joystick and the encoder. I mean, this is a very nice little button encoder thing here.
And both wheels come with the same exact layout.
So you're looking at 11 buttons, an encoder, a joystick wheel. Now on this one, what I did like is that I had about 4 to 6 buttons that I could activate very well while driving. Felt good like a Formula 1. When I drive that wheel, There is not one button on that wheel that I can actually reach with my little hands.
And even me being 6'4", I even struggle to get, with my thumb, I can't really reach unless I take my hand off the wheel.
Yeah.
So, not something that you're gonna be doing on the fly. Would have liked to have seen some buttons maybe,
That would have changed that rim for me.
Yep. And let's talk about the rims and the size of the rims. And we talked about that it would be nice if they had a base rim. That's one of my complaints. I know it's one of your complaints for a round rim. This is too big, and then this is too small if you were gonna, for as far as being in the middle goes.
Or even just for an oval guy, you wouldn't want to use an F1 wheel, so to speak.
Yep. So while we're on the subject of buttons, let's talk about the paddles. So the GT rim has these larger paddles, and then the F1 rim has those.
Smaller paddles.
And I gotta say, these are probably some of the highest quality paddles we've seen on a rim.
Absolutely, they feel great.
Yeah.
The way they move doesn't feel like sim equipment, it feels like racing equipment.
Yeah, and the same with these two. Now, curious, are these paddles too far for you?
They are too far, but what's funny, they're too far. Everything about this wheel is just too big for me. So the paddles are too far, it's too wide, the buttons are too far in. It's gigantic to me.
Yeah. For me, with the longer hands, my longer fingers, I don't have a problem. The stock throw was a little too far. I shortened the throw, but that's one of the cool things. You can take these paddles off, you can shorten the throw, you can adjust them a little bit. So really cool paddle shifters for sure. All right, that's gonna take us to the pros and cons, and we already touched on some of these things, but we may touch on them again, but we're just gonna kind of roll through these. And first pro is love the buttons and knobs. Placement may not be the best on this rim, but it's awesome on this rim. I didn't have any problems with it during my Indy 500. I kept getting confused between these two, but that was just lack of being familiar with this wheel. Some more pros, PS3 compatible, one of the best feeling wheels with Gran Turismo 5. I'm looking forward to trying it with Gran Turismo 6, which is coming out right around the corner here. The sim racing art. We talked about the acrylic window at the top of the base, and being able to see that mechanism and just in all its glory is really cool.
I completely agree. I mean, the reason I rave about human racing is because it's racing art.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way about this wheel. Just, it is art. It's the most beautiful wheel on the market, hands down.
Yep.
Something else on the pro side is that it's compatible with most of the other Fanatec equipment. So if you have the shifters or the better pedals, so it's not going to work with the old 911 pedals, but
probably not.
All the other Fanatec stuff does work with this. I don't know why you'd use some of the lesser gear when you're stepping up to this level though, so I'd probably recommend Clubsport pedals.
Yep.
Another pro is the solid construction. You've heard us rave about it. It's heavy duty feeling. It's got the Alcantara grips, which I love the feeling of. I mean, ultimately, these
all Alcantara here.
All Alcantara. Oh, all Alcantara.
Yeah.
And the ultimate, you've heard us talk, they feel like real car wheels.
Yep.
I mean, they're very substantial, they're very solid, and they're not toy equipment at all.
Yep.
So that's that metal construction, very little plastic. Where there is plastic, it's basically just a cover.
Yep.
It's just to hide the internals, really.
Yep.
It's not a functional piece of the construction.
It's got the smooth belt drive mechanism, which at that price point and anything below it is probably the smoothest mechanism, from up to that price point. Now go above that price point, ECCI and Frex, and it's equivalent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, the same functionality of the Fanatec rims. So you got all the presets. You can adjust things on the fly. So it's got all that. The rev lights and shift light indicator all work with Gran Turismo 5. So you got that compatibility. Also, you have it like an iRacing, and I believe in like a Assetto Corsa. That's all standard functionality now.
Right.
And then solid force feedback in Gran Turismo 5. Mentioned how good it worked in that, and felt solid all across the board.
And another pro isn't even Fanatec, it's EK Sim Racing, but they've made some software that kind of takes this to a different level. It changes what the display will do, and you can actually end up using the encoder to change the information on the display.
There's the other guy too, the Fanata LEDs.
Yeah, you've got other companies adding additional software that might even take this to a different level as well.
Yep.
And the last pro really is the quick release. It's a real deal. I mean, this is like you do if you're getting into a real open-wheeled car, which is when you'd really need it, because I don't know if I'd really need a quick release for my sim racing gear, because no one's going to jump in the car after me, or it doesn't make it easier to get in my sim rig. But it is very cool and well done, and kind of a nice thing that people ask for.
Yep. And that's going to take us to the cons, and the first con being that when you're attaching pedals directly to the base versus running them as standalone, you're losing bits of resolution. So you're not going to have as many steps or as smooth input on your pedals as you would as if you plugged them in direct. And then another thing is, it doesn't come with a set of pedals, so you have to buy those. Additionally, which leads us to our next con, is it's expensive.
Yeah, you're right, it is expensive. I mean, we're looking at about $1,000 for everything if you throw in the Clubsport pedals as well, so that is very pricey. And, you know, for that price, I'd expect some manuals to go along with it. Maybe a little dongle with some software, a little bit of extra support, a little bit of extra taking care of me when I'm gonna spend that kind of money on my product.
I agree, and that was definitely one of the cons. You know, this is another con, this quick guide. I mean, come on, send some kind of documentation. The manual online was honestly, the video manual was not much different than what we found in the quick guide. So I'd like to see, point us to some of the guides that, you know, the community's set up, but don't rely on the community to point people.
Exactly.
Fanatec needs to take care of that.
Yeah, when you talk about the amount of tuning options that are actually one of the pros of this wheel, it kind of becomes a con when you don't even know what to do with it.
Exactly. Their track record could be a con. Fanatec has not been known for the best customer service. And they haven't been known for the best reliability.
Right.
Now, we have not had any problems with this wheel. Plug and play, I did not have to do any, I told them too, I said, listen, I don't want to have to do any firmware updates. This is one of the pros for Fanatec getting us a rim that's been in the market now for over a year, is that, you know,
it's got reputation and people out there.
Well, but they were able to get it all dialed in for me. You know, that they've perfected the drivers a lot better.
Right.
I have heard horror stories. You know, a guy sent me an email. This is one of the cons to them waiting to send us this wheel, is that we've heard from the community. And I got an email directly from a guy saying, hey, I know you're going to review this. You might want to tell people I had problems. He's one guy. And yeah, he got a wheel that was dead on arrival, and then he had to pay to ship it back. And it was refurbished. They refurbished his brand new wheel that he never even turned a lap in. So, but again, anything you buy a brand new car, it could be, it's called a lemon. You know, it could be, you can just get one that wasn't built to spec or just wasn't performing properly.
And again, from our perspective, this is by reputation. I mean, I honestly played with this for a month on my rig, trying to break it, because it was like, all right, let's see what this thing can handle. I'll admit it. And it held up to everything I could throw at it.
And honestly, I took a big chance running that Indy 500. We might as well just get to our final thoughts here, because, no, we got one more con before we get to our final thoughts.
Okay, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here.
Because I talk about it anyway. But you mentioned, let's talk about your con here.
Okay. For me, you know me, I'm Sean the sock hole. I have this twitchy way of saving cars when I'm driving. Not how I would tell people to do it. But I found this wheel on the reversing direction to be just a little bit slow for me. So sometimes I wasn't catching things like I expect to.
And I didn't have that problem. I was just going to mention I ran that whole Indy 500. Again, I kind of took a risk based on that guy saying my wheel died, you know, and I thought that's a big event for me too. And I took a chance running it, but the thing was flawless for me. And I didn't have that issue that Sean has with it being slow, which is kind of getting to our final thoughts. The thing ran great for me.
Yeah, and at this point we're talking months of abuse, thousands of miles if you really break it down.
I put 500 in one day.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, that's going to take us to our final thoughts. And this is a quality piece of sim racing hardware. Again, like we said, it's sim racing art. High quality buttons, solid force feedback, built of metal. I mean, this is probably one of the few rims that feels like it could actually be in a real car. Man, I'm sure if you attached it may not have the electronics, but this thing would turn a car. No question about it. I would feel safe with this attached to my car. But yeah, it's a quality piece of equipment. Again, you have to pay for the price of admission. It doesn't come with a set of pedals. I would have liked to have seen more documentation. Dump the bag, dump the fancy box. Give me a manual, give me a certificate. Something that makes me feel special and makes the $1,000 that I just spent more warranted.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So that's you.
We talked about racing art. I love things that are artistic and functional at the same time. This really hits me on that level. It's a beautiful piece of art to me. It's very high quality. Its force feedback is incredible. At the price though, you'd be doing it out of appreciation for your hobby, love of finer materials in life, not because it's going to deliver you faster lap times than any other wheel on the market. It comes down to appreciation more than anything else for me. And with that, when I'm talking that kind of money, I'd like to see a little bit better track record. It makes me a little nervous about writing that check for so much money and maybe being a guy who does get a lemon. So hopefully in the future, there are less cases of lemon, their reputation and customer service comes up to the level of the components they've made.
So that's pretty much going to wrap things up. People were asking for us to compare this to the T500, and they are comparable to a certain extent. You know, Sean just touched on it, you know, about, you know, being comfortable with your equipment or having a higher appreciation for something. Is this going to make you faster? Not necessarily. It might.
Yeah, if you have like a Sidewinder wheel or something.
Yeah, if you're using some old piece of junk, but honestly, if you're super comfortable with a G27 or the T500, is this wheel gonna make you faster? No. Does it feel more professional? Yeah. I mean, does it feel like it's more like it's supposed to be in a real car? Yes.
Is it gonna increase your level of enjoyment of sim racing?
Could, yeah.
It would for me in a big way.
Yeah, it definitely could. So that being said, we hope you've enjoyed our review. If you wanna talk to us about what you thought of this review or give us your take on this wheel, join us on our forums at ISR TV. We're gonna have a thread set up specifically for this review. Also, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and I think that's gonna wrap things up. For Sean Cole, I'm Darren Ganji. We'll see you guys next time.
GT Chassis Racing Rigs provided by Human Racing. Go to humanracing.co.th.